the I Mold You So podcast with Katie Buckland Weiss.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of I Mold You So with Katie Buckland Weiss, the podcast where we talk honestly about mold illness, the symptoms that don't always make sense, the testing that can feel overwhelming, and the healing journeys that so many of us never expected to be on. Amen. If you've ever felt dismissed, misdiagnosed, or told that everything looks normal while you know something isn't right, this episode is for you. Today, we are diving into one of the most requested and most misunderstood topics, mold illness, what it is, how it affects your body, and how people actually begin to heal. I'm getting goosebumps, actually. I'm incredibly grateful to be joined by a physician who brings personal experience, clinical expertise, and deep compassion to this work. My guest today is Dr. Terri Fox, a holistic and integrative physician who specializes in mold toxicity and complex chronic illnesses. Dr. Fox works with patients who have often been to countless doctors, I can relate, tried endless treatments, and still don't have clear answers. Her approach focuses on identifying root causes, understanding how mold impacts multiple systems in the body, and guiding patients through a thoughtful, individualized path toward healing. She also has a great course that we'll talk about in just a moment. In today's conversation, we'll talk about why mold illness is so often missed, the symptoms that Dr. Fox sees most commonly, how testing really works, and what recovery can realistically look like, especially for people who've been sick for a long time. Dr. Fox, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work that you're doing in this space.
Yes. So, Dr. Fox, can you share with the listeners your journey into medicine and what led you to focus on mold toxicity and SIRS and this chronic illness that you're seeing consistently in your office?
Right. So I went to medical school. So I'm a regular MD at UC San Francisco. I was always more leaning a lot more towards the holistic, natural, integrative approach. But so I would have rather gone to naturopathic school. But I figured if I could do med school, then I could integrate the natural and the holistic and all that. And so then I did a board certification in integrative holistic medicine, and then I trained in functional medicine. And then I've been doing that since maybe 03 or 04. And functional medicine is awesome. And when you apply it to, their digestion or sleep or a lot of things, it works really well. So basically I was doing functional medicine and for years, and about 15% of my patients wouldn't budge no matter what we did. And at that stage, I figured out most of them had Lyme, and I didn't know about mold yet. And so I sort of dove into the Lyme world against my will a little bit.
Right.
As soon as you start learning about it, it just walks in your door over and over. And then my son he was 8 years old when he started limping. He was one of these like really thrill-seeking, maniac, active kids that fearless. And he started limping, and I would ask him, do your knees hurt? And he would go, no. And then he would start out walking normal, but I wasn't looking. He'd be limping, and he was sort of stiff in the mornings. And after car rides, he started getting anxiety and panic attacks. This was like a fearless kid. And he put on 30 pounds in 2 months or something. He was like,
Wow.
little. So that was, I didn't know that was such a telltale sign at that stage, but that was kind of awful. And then we did, I also knew nothing about mold or remediation at that point. So we figured out there was a bit of a water leak in the attic above his bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a construction company come in and take care of the water issue. And I didn't know about containment and negative air and all that. After that, my son didn't get out of bed for 6 months. He had
And he's 9.
At this point, he's 9, and he had 9 out of 10 pain in his head. I called it a migraine, but it was really unresponsive to any migraine meds. And so at that stage, I was sick as well. But you have kids. When your kids are sick, super sick, you don't really think about yourself so much.
You just keep pushing through.
Yeah, you just push through, stay up all night Googling and looking up stuff. Taking him to specialists. Anyway, so I brought him to Dr. Stephen Harris in California, who is an amazing Lyme doc. And we started him on some antibiotics for Lyme and Bartonella. And then he gave me a urinary mycotoxin test, a real-time labs one. So we brought it home. We did it. It came back really high. And so at that point, we knew, there's other stuff happening. And so this time I got a real indoor environmental out to the house. And there was 3 feet of water under our entire house, under the entire thing in the crawl space. Like we had this crawl space where some places are really tall, some places like this. And we'd opened up and like looked at it because it was a year of the Boulder flood. We had a huge flood in 2013 and we had sort of thought we were okay. But when they came out, they cut the vapor barrier and there was water under the whole house. And the airborne spore traps were all in the red, like for Stacky and everything, which
Yes.
I still never even seen that.
Oh,
So
be glad
it
you
was
can't.
really,
It'll give you
it was really
nightmares.
bad. Yeah. So then we started treating him for mold. We had to remediate the house. We sold it. I was like, I'm not staying in this house.
Right.
And my son's never going to get better in here. So we remediated it, sold it. The marriage didn't make it out. But when I got Kai
I
out,
just did a post on mold and marriage and what it can do.
yeah, it's hard. So once we moved out and I started him on like phase 2 mold detox, which is antifungals and biofilm, he got better really quickly. I mean, kids are more resilient. And so within a couple months, 2 to 3, he was back at school full time and playing soccer and everything.
Okay, so from the time you put it together and you moved out, you started treating him. What is that time frame? 6 months? 12 months?
It's like June when I went out. 5 months.
Okay.
5 months before I got him out of the exposure.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then back at school shortly after that?
We had to start kind of slow. So we would do, I don't remember, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And I think
Okay.
for the first couple months, I just said, if you feel crappy, just tell me and we won't go. And he said, so like, then it was like every now and then he'd go, I need a rest day and I'd keep him home. And maybe that was about 3 months or so.
Well, I think it's important to manage people's expectations, right? Just because once you get the diagnosis or once you figure out that's mold,
Yeah.
you're not better overnight. It is a process.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lovely diagnosis. It's very, very treatable. People do really well. The hard part is getting yourself into a clean space. But if you're if you're already out of the exposure and it's a previous exposure, it's a lovely clinical turnaround. People do really well. And they get it. You're right. It should manage expectations. So it's minimum 6 months, more like over a year of treatment. But if you're not being exposed, you start to feel better after just 2 weeks on the right binders.
Yeah.
So it's not like you don't feel good for 6 months to a year. You're getting better the whole time.
Right. I always say like I'd have initially one good day, 6 bad days, and then the next week it was 2 good
Yeah.
days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even
It's
now,
not
18
like,
months out, I'll have one bad day, but
yeah.
we're almost there. So you had a firsthand, just very unfortunate experience, but positive that you got through this. And then given your expertise, you were able to help identify other folks that were suffering from this, which I
Yeah.
think is so important because really, as we were talking about, the whole point of I Mold You So is I want to be a resource for people that are sick and not getting any answers. Like you talk about going from doctor to doctor, oh, you look fine. And then, but you're clearly not. And you know that you're getting sicker, or hey, your blood work looks good, or, and nobody's bringing up mold. And for me, I kept getting sicker and sicker, went on long-term disability, and was not getting any help. And people start to feel like they're going crazy. And so I want to plant this in their minds that if you are having all these symptoms, we'll talk about symptoms in a moment, just ask, maybe this is mold. Because if it is, like you said, you can have great outcome. But if you don't know what you're chasing and the root cause as you treat, people can be stuck for years and years in this cycle.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I was just going to ask, when you think about conventional medicine, it is often overlooked, right?
Yes.
So how do people go about this?
So we're taught nothing in medical school about mold, nothing except that it's a fungus. So you're not going to have a lot of awareness from most of your regular conventional docs. So if you have like a constellation of unusual symptoms and you've been to, 5 to 20 to 40 specialists, and they all say it doesn't fall into any of our diagnoses, or you've got chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or IBS or, what's that? I love the mixed connective tissue disorders. That's what the rheumatologists call when they don't know what it is. Anyways, if you get those sort of, nobody knows what it is, it's probably worth just doing a mold test on yourself or finding a doc. If you do a functional medicine doctor, they'll mostly know how to, at least how to test for it.
And the test that you prefer, is there
Yeah.
a certain brand?
Yeah,
I think
so
you mentioned one
I like the
earlier.
urinary mycotoxin, and that's because it tells me which strains are in the body. And then there's different binders for different strains of mold. So different binders have a different affinity for different mycotoxins, so they pull them out differently. And so I like the Real Time Labs myco. I like the Vibrant myco as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Good. Well, we want to give our listeners access to this in addition to great clinicians and physicians that can get them on their healing journey. So many of our listeners come from a place of frustration and misdiagnosis. So, how would you describe mold related illness to someone who's been dismissed by traditional doctors? And maybe by you sharing this, someone might say, hey, that's me.
Yeah. So do you mean like symptoms, what the symptomatology looks like?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the common symptoms are fatigue and brain fog, cognitive dysfunction of all kinds, word recall, like all kinds of different stuff. And then insomnia and anxiety, sometimes depression, and then a lot of unusual neurological symptoms that don't fit into a neurodiagnosis. So balance issues,
Mhm.
visual issues, asymmetrical numbness, tingling, weakness, burning sensations, ice pick sensations, crawling sensations. And then there's unusual, unexplained weight gain or loss, which is always kind of a tip off for me in clinic. And it's also sometimes helpful to think about the timeline. So, like, where were you living when it first started?
Mm.
And have you been out of there? Like that kind of thing sometimes can help you sort of figure out if it could be exposure in your home.
Right. And neurological, like you mentioned, your son limping, or in my case, like I had this crazy left arm that was retracted and dragging up left leg, and just then the shaking set in. I mean, just wild. It's just like your body's
Shudders.
shutting down on you. Yes. I'd be in the grocery store, and then my little girl would look at me and say, Mom, you're shaking again. And I'm like, help me. So we talked about some of the common symptoms. Why do some people get very sick from mold exposure when others don't?
Yeah, great question. One day we'll know the answer. So the number we've always used is it's only about 25% of the population that's sensitive to mold, which means if you're in a home with 4 people, it's totally possible only one of them gets taken down, which is very confusing because how could it be the house? Because everybody else feels fine and all that. And I think that the 25% is growing because I mean, it's also the lens at which I look through everything, right? And it walks in my door all day long. But I do think it's more than a quarter now. And I think that to do with total body burden. So total body burden is a concept that
Okay.
when you're
Explain.
born, you have an internal bucket, and throughout your life, you get exposures to things. So, plastics, pesticides, glyphosate, maybe heavy metals, maybe a bunch of spike protein and inflammation from a few COVID hits, maybe some biotoxin from Lyme, maybe, mycotoxins. And so, mycotoxins will fill up a huge of that bucket. When the bucket overflows is when the system crashes and you get symptomatic. And so I think that our buckets are much more full than they were like when we were young, for example. And I think that that's partially why more people are getting sick from mold. It's just a total body burden. So they don't have any bandwidth anymore to, have any other toxic
You
exposures.
can't hold anything else, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then, there's also the whole EMF thing that I know
Right.
you know about. So electromagnetic frequencies, from our phones and computers and our Wi-Fi and all that, will actually have mold release more mycotoxins into the air. And we have, you know, 5G everywhere. So
Yeah.
I'm sure, I imagine that many people could have handled a little mold in the basement before that they can't now because now there's
No.
EMFs making it angry and more toxic, and then their buckets are more full. And yeah, I just think a lot more people get
Yeah.
sick from it.
Well, and
And
I
the
think about,
why,
go ahead,
who
Terry.
knows? There's probably genetic stuff that we don't understand yet about the why. Some people do and some don't, but I feel like I see a lot more
Well, does
now where like everybody
MTHFR
gets
play into that for you in the way that you practice
a
medicine? I mean,
little.
does
I check it on everybody. Almost all my mold patients have a significant mutation, and I give them methylation support. I think it's a little part of the puzzle, not like a huge part.
yeah. Well, and my research, and as I went through this, found out that I was MTHFR. But mentioning the EMFs, I was at home in my little office with my modem right next to me. We
Yeah,
had Wi-Fi going through the house. We had mold right above me. I didn't know. I was like brewing this recipe
exactly
of,
right. Probably a humidifier right next to the mold,
yes,
feeding
my
it.
space heater. I mean, all of it. It just was, the perfect storm. But yeah, and I also think, as I understand this, the nervous system has a lot to do with this. And going through this, I was in fight or flight. I didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think nervous system plays into this, like building and then the overflow, but then also in the recovery. Because honestly, I think that's the hardest part, is like calming your nervous system.
Mm.
And for someone that has been going through this for years, trying to figure out what's going on with them, or they're in the thick of it right now, like my world is falling apart, my brain, my body, everything is falling apart. That adds, I mean, then you're even more, fight or flight. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, so first I'm going to talk a little bit about the nervous system and mold, and then I'll talk about re-regulating the nervous system in order to get better. So many of the mycotoxins are neurotoxins. They attack the central nervous system and the peripheral nerves. The ones that are the most sort of toxic or pathogenic disease causing are the trichothecenes. Those come from black mold and other more toxic molds, and they've been used as chemical warfare agents. They're nasty. They will do things like your retracted arm, and people will have weird balance and all kinds of things. So mold attacks the nervous system. So that's a huge part. And then there's a very common thing that happens when you've been sick for a long time and you've been to a bunch of doctors and nobody can figure out anything. And, like you said, that you start feeling maybe like you're crazy. And I'm definitely here to tell you that you're not. But in order to actually get all the way well, you have to sort of feel safe in your body. And usually when you've been poisoned invisibly by your house and then been told by everybody nothing's wrong with you, you have your own medical trauma at that point, and it's really
Yeah.
hard to feel safe. And so there's a few different things, like we do limbic retraining and then vagal retraining, vagal regulation, all those things help with calming down the nervous system and helping you feel more safe, and also handling some of the, many people have trauma, from before, but it's its own like trauma, this illness, and the trying to search for the diagnosis and all that. So yeah, if a patient is really sensitive to things and doesn't tolerate anything like early on, then I have them start on the nervous system resetting straight away, because their body's just rejecting everything.
Wow. They're that
Brain
like,
cell danger response. Yeah. So I'll pull it in earlier, but if not, I get them going on everything in the MOLE protocol, which is a handful, enough to begin with. And then, but at some point, we do a little either limbic retraining, vagal retraining. Primal Trust is one that does both the vagus and the limbic retraining. That's kind of fun.
this is remarkable. I don't know anything about this. So if people walk in your door and, as you said, they've seen 20 or 40 doctors before and they are desperate for help. So what is that typical patient profile outside of the symptoms? They come in, they're Dr. Fox, nobody believes me. I've been sick for 2 years. Like, what is that like working with you? What can someone
Yeah.
expect?
I mean, so usually most of my patients have seen 20 to 40 docs before they come to me. They've been to the Mayo Clinic. They've tried sort of everything. And then somewhere along the road, they get aware of biotoxin, LMS, mold and Lyme kind of thing. And then they'll, by the time they get to me, they may or may not know what they've got, but they've definitely got a huge list of mysterious symptoms that nobody can quite diagnose. And so, I do a full 2-hour intake, and that gives me a lot of clues, as to what might be at play and what might be root cause. And then we do a bunch of diagnostics and a pretty big blood draw for just markers for all kinds of other things that it could be. And then depending on the intake, there's a lot of testing I might do. And if it sounds like mold, I'll do that mold test right away.
Wonderful. And then based on what you find out, you put them on different protocols. And not everybody that sees you has mold, right? They might just have Lyme.
Right, right. I
Okay.
would guess 85% or more of my patients have mold.
Well, lucky us that we get to be talking to you today.
I mean, I think it's just now that I'm known for that, so they just walk in my door, and yeah, some don't know, but yeah, that's a lot of mold.
I mean, I just wish I would have known this 2.5 years ago
Gosh,
and
right? I
known
mean, I'm
you.
trying too. I'm on all these podcasts trying to get the word out. I'm also on I'm one of the, sorry, what's it called? Medical I'm on the board of medical directors for Save the Air Foundation,
Okay.
which is a nonprofit organization that's trying to bring more awareness to the world and also a lot of more legislation so that we have rights and renters have rights and the military families have rights and, all of that stuff. So, there are people out there trying to change things and get the word out, but
Yeah.
anything that can help is great.
Well, and some people don't even want to crack the door open on mold because it can be so overwhelming, right? Like once I heard remediation, I'm thinking, how expensive is this going to be? And then I look back at all of the dollars spent just kind of on dead ends, but I was so desperate to do it and to get answers and to return to health and be a mom to my kids.
Yeah.
But I have received quite a few questions about people like if we can't get out of our home or we don't have the means to move or the means to remediate. And I was fortunate enough we were able to remediate, and just by the grace of God, my husband got a transfer, and so we had to move. But are there any tips that someone could do if they can't move out of that environment? Are there things they can do, or is it really, my biggest piece of advice is get out of there. Get out of there.
So, yes, get out of there.
Yeah.
You're not going to get all the way better in the exposure. We can mitigate a little bit and we can treat some stuff. So I do advocate for starting treatment while you're still in the exposure. So I do a mold eradication protocol that's in 2 phases.
Okay.
And phase 1 is sort of training the body how to pull these mycotoxins out. So the people that get sick from mold are the ones that can't detox it, they can't metabolize it, they can't get it out of the body in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And so it just builds up and fills up that bucket. So if you start, so generally the body doesn't know how to pull them out for the people that get really sick. So the whole phase 1 is sort of teaching it and supporting it and doing binders and glutathione, organ detox support, all that stuff. You can do all of that when you're still in the exposure, and that will still begin to take down your levels
Okay.
of mycotoxin so that when you get out, it's less work for you to do.
Okay. That's
Yeah. And
encouraging.
then phase 2 is antifungals and biofilm. I wouldn't do that in the exposure. I'd wait till you're out.
And that's helpful because there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, right? People should not
Yeah,
try to just like figure it out on their own.
yeah, yeah. I would encourage people not like to basically either get somebody guiding you that knows what they're doing, or just really go slow. Don't try to throw 1,000 things in at once. It's really easy to make yourself more sick because let's say you take more binders than the body is capable of getting that much mycotoxins out, then you feel more sick. So you
Right.
feel more symptomatic, and you might get migraines or, whatever your symptoms are. And you're not getting there any faster by suffering. You're mobilizing things, and you might be mobilizing them to a worse place.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so you always want to pay attention that you feel nothing or better before you continue on your protocol or
That you feel
decrease.
nothing or better.
Nothing or
Nothing or
better.
better.
Let's say you're
Wow.
on 2 activated charcoals and then you go up to 3 and you feel nothing or better. Then you go up to 4 and you feel horrible and all your mold symptoms are worse. Then you go back down to 3. And
Okay.
then you can check it again a week later just to make sure it wasn't coincidence. If it wasn't, you stay there for a while, and then
Okay.
start layering in the other things
Wow. I
before
love this.
trying
This
to
is
go up.
very, very specific to the individual, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this from personal experience. I was healing, feeling so much better. And then I made my way downtown to a linen store that was in an old factory. And I didn't think anything about it. I was in there for about 10 or 15 minutes, just looking for some linens, and very quickly onset of symptoms again that I had been away from for probably 5 or 6 months. Pure panic. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's back. Like, and I felt it in my arm. Like my arm went limp. Like my eyes were
Vision.
blurry. It was wild, and it came on very quickly. I hurried to my car. I called my husband. I was like, I'm freaking out. Like it's back. It's back. And then I drove, got home, and maybe an hour and a half better, or an hour and a half later, I felt a little bit better. But then I thought to myself, I'm in an old building. Like, there had to have been mold in there. And that has happened to me like maybe 2 or 3 times in the
Okay.
last 18 months where I am exposed. Maybe it's a strong exposure, a big exposure, something, and my symptoms come back.
Yeah.
But they don't stay with me for a week or 2. I thought they might stay longer, but it comes on hard and fast,
Yeah.
and it's very scary. But it's not a step backwards. It's just like, I'm probably going to have to manage this the rest of my life or for a while I get to full recovery. Do you find this often with your patients?
Yes, and it's just amazing news that it didn't take you long at all to get better, right? So for a lot of people, once they're better, they when they get into an exposure, I call it like you have new alarm bells, and I think the purpose is sort of to keep you from getting silently poisoned again and ending up where you
Right. Wow.
so initially, when you first get well and out, the alarm bells can be very intense. You go into, I have people that go into Home Depot or movie theater and all their neuropathies come back like that.
Yes.
Yes. And then there's also the thing where you start to feel the symptoms and then you panic. And then you think that, oh God, I'm going to be as sick as I was. And you get
Right.
terrified. And that like adrenal, sympathetic panic response can increase the inflammatory response of the mold itself. So over time, what
My
we try to
word.
do is just not panic and trust that your body knows how to do this now. It's been trained. It will recover. You bounce right back. If you don't, you know what to do. You go back on your binders and all that stuff for a little while. It'll clear. And the further out you get, the less the alarm bells are and the quicker you bounce back.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I'm
So
not
the
alone in
goal,
that. That is remarkable. I mean,
yeah,
wow.
I mean, the goal is tolerance and resiliency. So, there's mold all
And part
over
of
the
your
place.
process treats those symptom flares as well. Like, hey,
Yes.
we're going to do this and get committed to this, and then we're going to get you healed. But if you do get an exposure, we can
Yeah.
get you back.
We
It's
actually
not,
create like a bit of a mini protocol for traveling. Like if you end up in a moldy Airbnb or hotel room, like, I have people bring their binders and some people have like, they're going home to like their families and they know that it's moldy. And so like they'll even bring like a portable purifier and different things like that. Open windows as much as you can, and if you're in a home you can't get out yet, open windows as much as you can. Any ventilation helps a lot.
yeah. And one thing I've learned through this, even when I first got diagnosed, I was working with my doctor. He's like, do you live in an old house? I'm like, no, we live in a new build. Was I've gone on this journey and I've worked with more and more environmental specialists. They're like, don't be fooled. New builds
Hmm.
can be just as bad as old homes or old offices or old cars. And then something else I learned is there was a case where there was a woman in her office and she was just so sick in her office. She had to take a leave of absence and they actually put it together. She loved plants. And so her office was full of plants with dirt and moisture. And once they moved the plants out, she returned to wellness as well. So that was the first time I'd ever heard something about the plants. But when I
Because
think back to,
plant kind of clean the air,
yeah,
but yeah, they also have the soil, and if that gets moldy, I suppose that could happen. Yeah.
yeah. So that was from an environmental specialist that we worked with in West Texas. That he's like, because I was like, tell us where we might get these exposures, outside of home or work or in our cars, that this might be happening to folks. Okay, so what are the biggest misconceptions around mold remediation
Okay.
and I guess DIY testing? But I think we already covered that really because like don't try to do this on your own.
No, there's some, so I always start with the person. So we would do like your mold test first. If that's positive, then we have to make sure it's not in your current home. And if you have no suspicion, there's no known water leak or history of a flood or musty smells or anything that you're aware of, it's not a bad place to start to do an ERMI, a qPCR, which is a DNA dust test that you
Okay.
get samples from around the house. And then if it looks bad, then you get the indoor environmental professional out to do the full house evaluation, the crawl space and the roof and the attics and everything. But I think an ERMI is a good place to start on the home if you're not suspicious. If
And
you
then
are,
what
then
about
you
the
might as well jump
body?
to the indoor environmental professional. Sorry.
What about the body? So there's, because it is twofold, the home, the environment, and then the body. Are there DIY body tests or really work with a physician like you that has access to these like real-time lab tests?
You can go ahead and do your mycotoxin and see if it's positive. So vibrant, you have to have a physician order, unfortunately. But if you have any kind of holistic doc, they could order it for you. Real-time labs, you can buy online.
Okay.
So real-time labs is very specific, meaning there's not a lot of false positives, but it's
Okay.
not as sensitive. It can miss a decent amount. So it has to be provoked. Look, the provocation I do is I have people come into clinic and I do an IV of phosphatidylcholine and glutathione, and that pulls out a ton of mycotoxins. And then
Just in one sitting, like
yeah,
it's
so it's about an hour and a half, the IV, and then we collect the urine about an hour later because you know how I said the people that get sick from mold are the ones that can't detox it. So a lot of times if I just do a urine, it's going to be negative because their body doesn't know how to get it out into the urine. And
what's
so
stuck in the body.
yeah, it's just building up in your system because you can't get it out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. So another way, you don't have to do, the IV PC and glutathione. You can do as much like liposomal glutathione as you can tolerate, maybe
Mhm.
1,000, 2,000 milligrams a day from me. And then you can do either an infrared sauna or a hot bath or something where you sweat and then do the real-time labs, mycotoxin. And I actually, if you were to buy the real-time labs mycotoxin, I have a 10% discount for patients. And I think I'll give it to you by the end. I think it's Dr. Fox Tox, like
Okay.
TOX for 10%, but I don't want to veer away from this window. So
Okay. We will want listeners that can
I'll
have
make sure.
access to that as a kind of step one to figure if they,
Yeah.
might need to come visit you and do your mold course or follow one of your protocols. Because while you're practicing in Colorado, you can't treat patients outside of Colorado. So that's really a great place if people want to access you and your best practices is going to be in the mold course.
Yeah. So because I'm an MD, I'm only licensed in the state of Colorado. So technically can only treat people that live here. And I get calls from all over the world. And so I created a mold eradication course. That's an online course that patients can do. I've had patients do it in Australia, all over the world. And it's very sort of handheld, step by step, walks you through exactly my whole protocol. There's 35 modules. They're pretty short and it's designed to really keep you from making yourself more sick while you try to treat it. So if you do things out of order, you can easily make yourself more sick, or if you go too fast. So I can give you like an example.
So please share.
So I'll define that and colonization. So imagine you're sleeping in a moldy place and it's humid, which means the mold is sporulating and it's up in the air that we're breathing. And you can swallow one down your esophagus. You can breathe one into your upper respiratory tract, and then it can stick and then replicate, have babies and families and create communities, aggregate together and form a colony. And then they secrete this glycoprotein matrix around the colony that protects it from our immune system and antifungal agents. So our immune system can't even see past the biofilm, nonetheless, get through it to try to detox the mold. And so, for example, if you are starting on a mold protocol and you start opening up biofilm in the beginning, you are going to flood the system with a ton more of the very same thing that just made you sick.
Okay.
So you're going
Wow.
to get so much worse. So like that has to be done later. There's just a particular pace and order to it in order to not make yourself sick.
This is
And in
fascinating.
a
Okay.
good mold treatment protocol, you should always feel nothing or better. You shouldn't be feeling worse.
Wow. Okay. And there's different types of biofilm, right?
Yeah, so bacterial biofilm is different than mold and yeast biofilm. Bacterial biofilm is kind of slimy, and the mold and yeast one's a little harder. So they have
And so
different,
they're treated differently, correct?
yeah, different, similar.
Okay.
Mostly enzymes, but it's different enzymes that you would use for a mold one versus a bacterial one.
Wow. Okay. So looking ahead, what breakthroughs? I mean, you're at the forefront of this. You're very well known. People are coming to you. I'm so excited you're joining us today. But looking ahead, what breakthroughs or advancements in mold illness diagnosis or treatment are you most excited about outside of just general awareness?
You mean new things coming?
Yeah.
Well, there is a few, like, there's a lot of like the plasma exchange, and there's like NU phoresis, and then There's a few things like that that I've been hearing about that are helpful for mold. I haven't really done a ton of, research to find out if I think that they really work, but I do have a couple patients that are going to do that, a
Okay.
plasma exchange, and see
Well,
how
we'll
that
make
goes.
sure that we follow along to see kind of what's working, what people are getting, results from. I love that you mentioned sauna. So when I think about my own healing journey, the infrared sauna was the biggest game changer for me. And then secondary on top of that, because I really believe that I was stuck. And so I couldn't, detox properly. I mean, that was clearly the case. But once I started moving my lymph, and I really started feeling better and really started detoxing. So do you have strong opinions about moving lymph and that playing a role in this?
Yeah. So I have a biotoxin relief guide. So biotoxin is something that a living organism releases that's pathogenic or disease causing to humans. Things like Lyme and Lyme co-infections, they release biotoxins that give us the like achiness and joint pain and flu-like symptoms. And then mold releases mycotoxins. And those are also biotoxins. And so I have a whole biotoxin relief guide that I give all my patients. And these are all modalities that help you detox and teach the body how to detox and how pull out the mycotoxins. So things
Okay.
like infrared sauna, lymphatic drainage, ionic foot bath, acupuncture, IV phosphatidylcholine and glutathione, coffee enemas. There's a whole world of things that can
Okay. So
help.
coffee enemas are also on there. I've heard a lot about them.
Yeah.
Is there, coffee's kind of taboo for me because when I was getting sick, every time I would drink coffee, I would be like just so sick and I
Well, you
couldn't
have to
quite put
do
my
a
finger on it. And
different
then I
kind of
figured
coffee
out
then.
like mold, like coffee has mold all over it. And so now I only do mold-free coffee. And so I imagine that holds true for the coffee enema as well.
Good point. Yes, there's specific kinds, and they're decaf and they're organic. And yeah, you want to get one of the mold free kinds.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that is something I have not tried yet, but I have friends and other fellow mold illness sufferers that are doing them. Okay, so as we wrap, I really want this to be a resource for folks that are trying to figure out why am I so sick? What is going on? And kind of open that door for mold. So when someone goes to their primary doctor to talk about mold, are there any tips you can provide for them? Because one might assume that a conventional doctor would be very skeptical about mold and dismiss them. So, are there any tips you could arm our listeners with if they go to their conventional doctor? Or is it skip your conventional doctor and head to functional?
I would just, if the goal is to get better quicker, then I would go to a functional or holistic integrative doc. You can go on like Institute of Functional Medicine's website and they have a directory of physicians. There's also ICI, which is the International Society of Environmentally Acquired Illness. And that's all the providers like me all over the world that do mold, plus
Okay.
all the indoor environmental professionals that do home inspections that are vetted, plus all the
Okay.
remediators that are vetted. So it's a group that we, consortium that we have conferences, but we, have an email list and collaborate a lot. But that has a physician directory on it too. And
Okay.
anybody on there will be well versed in mold.
Yeah, and that's great to know because a lot of folks are like, hey, I don't live in Texas because I worked with a doctor here in Weatherford, but he's not able to treat them because they're in another state. But they want access to a doctor that is familiar and accepting of what they might be going through and have the ability to help them. What final word of encouragement might you share with those that are listening who feel stuck, dismissed, or overwhelmed by their symptoms?
So I find mold to be a very treatable diagnosis. So when I get a patient that's, chronic complex illness, has been sick for a super long time, or has Lyme, I kind of always hope that their mold is positive because it's so treatable. It's so much easier to treat than Lyme and a lot of other things. And I don't mean that it's necessarily super easy. It's a complicated protocol, but it's just such a good turnaround. Like don't think you're never going to get better. You can, if it's mold, you can totally get better. You can get 100% better from mold with a good mold doc, or get the mold course, the mold eradication protocol that I made.
And we'll make sure to link that so folks have access to it. But right, it's not a terminal diagnosis. And I
It's really
think,
not. People do really, really well. The hardest part is the home. So, that's the trickiest part is getting yourself into a clean space. But a
yeah,
lot of my mold patients, it's a previous exposure. They're not even in it.
but it's just lingering and their body can't
It's
detox it.
colonized. So
Yeah,
now the source is within. It's releasing its own mycotoxins from being colonized in your body.
remarkable,
So the purpose
remarkable.
of mold is to decompose and turn over the planet so that we can have like new growth from a flower that's dead. But we don't want it decomposing our living organism while we're still around from inside.
No, and it just
No.
destroys us from the inside out.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Dr.
But I
Fox,
would
thank
say you
you.
should absolutely have hope and don't believe anybody that you're crazy. That's not.
Yes. Well, and this is so encouraging. As you kicked off the podcast, just, there is a lot of hope. And as someone who suffered from this and had very, very dark days when there were no answers and I was getting sicker, to know that, hey, there can be a diagnosis for this and an explanation for all of your symptoms. But even more so, there's a path to healing. And we can access that through physicians like you and protocols that you offer. So, as I mentioned, I'll make sure to link those when we share this on YouTube, Spotify, and of course, my website, iMoldYouSo. Also, some discounts that you have for some other resources out there that we'll share with our listeners. And we'll make sure that we do all this. But Dr. Fox, if someone wanted to find you, where can we get in touch with you, or what's the best way to access you?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. So if you're interested at all in the course, which is a lot more affordable than seeing me, you go to drfoxmedicaldetective.com and everything about the course is on there, but there's also a ton of blogs and podcasts, and there's a free webinar that
Great.
talks all about mold. So if you're curious, you're not sure if this is the right thing, you can go watch that webinar on there, and that might give you some clues. And then it's boulderholistic.com is my practice.
Okay.
And that website has a ton of, resources on it as well.
And then
So
your
there's
Instagram is great as well.
and my Instagram, Terri Fox MD. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining I Mold You So. And we look forward to having everyone join us again when we bring in experts and physicians that are tackling the unhidden, or rather the hidden truth behind mold.
The I Mold You So podcast with Katie Buckland Weiss.